Hello, I hope you're well. Welcome to another week of Meals with Jesus. We are staying with this theme for another month. We're continuing with it because it is helping us to think about some of the meals that Jesus shared with other people and helping us to get to know Jesus a little bit better, seeing the implications of who he shared meals with then and how that can impact us today. And we think that's really important. So we've got a few more weeks of the series. I hope you've enjoyed it so far. If you were with us in person for Together last week in Ramsey, we were looking at Zacchaeus. We were thinking about generosity and how one encounter with Jesus for Zacchaeus changed him, which in turn changed the whole town. There were some great discussions on that. So if not, catch up on that story. But we are this week looking at Luke 22 verses 7 to 22, and it is sometimes most commonly known as the Last Supper. So if you have time in your day, I would really encourage you to read it. Maybe pause the video here and give it a read first. It's a passage you may be familiar with already, and give it a read and then press play again, and then this will make a lot more sense. I'm not going to read it out because it takes a lot of time, and it's nice for you to be able to read it in your own time, in your own version that you enjoy reading it in. But that is the passage that we are in today, Luke 22 verses 7 to 22. And we are thinking about Jesus having a meal with friends, essentially, but with the awareness that Jesus knows this is the last meal that he's going to have with his friends, with his disciples, before his betrayal. And yet, in the passage itself, in verse 14, Jesus says that he has been eager to eat this meal with the disciples before his suffering begins. I'm not sure when we think about that in terms of today that I would be eager and looking forward to sharing a meal with a person or people who were going to betray me or hurt me or do something bad to me or, hurt me in a way, essentially for Jesus, that led to his death. The Roman Empire then went on to kill Jesus as a consequence of Judas's actions and betrayal. I'm not sure that I could sit at a table with Judas or with my friend who had done that to me, let alone be eager to sit at a table and share a meal with them, or send my other friends ahead to prepare this meal and look forward to this meal. So I think, again, just in that one verse alone for us to think about today, we often read through these things or we hear these things and we just think, well, yeah, of course he did because he's Jesus. It's easy for him. And, of course he could sit and share that meal with Judas knowing he was going to betray him. But when we actually think about the reality of that, I being honest, I'm not sure that I could do it as much as I really want to look like Jesus. That would be really hard. So I think that awareness of the strength that it takes and the love that it takes to be able to do that is incredible, and a reminder of why following Jesus changes us so much for the better if we're able to look like him and to do those things to other people in our communities and to treat people the way that Jesus treated people is amazing. So through this meal, Jesus shows his disciples that there is a hope for a better future in him. He knows what's coming. He knows what's going to happen. And the Passover is mentioned a lot within this passage. You'll notice it's repeated. And it's a huge important meal on the Jewish calendar. We know that it's a time of celebration. It was an annual reminder for people, for their ancestors and what they went through being oppressed in Egypt, and God giving them a hope for a different future and an alternative path for the Jewish people. And in the Last Supper, Jesus is kind of revealing, or we can read into it, that Jesus is giving us an alternative path, reminding us of our fulfillment in Jesus, reminding us of our hope in Jesus. It's very different for us reading it now after the events with all that we know to what the disciples would have experienced not knowing what was going to happen yet and having Jesus physically there with them. It's a completely different way for us to read scripture compared to what they were experiencing at the time, and that awareness is also, I find, really helpful. So Jesus is through the Passover kind of indicating to us what is coming, our hope in Jesus, what that looks like. He also repeats "for you" in this passage a lot, and he gives his body and his blood for you, for us. So when he's breaking the bread and taking the wine, that, the phrase is repeated, "for you," a lot. And again, I find it helpful to think about that phrase, "for you." As a follower of Jesus, what can I do for you? What can I do for others? How can I give myself that in a way that mirrors Jesus in that way, for you, for others? So everyday situations, what can I do for my family, for other people? What can I do for my work colleagues, for the playgroup that I lead? What can I do for the person in front of me whose card isn't working, they can't afford their nappies? What can I do for you, for others? That helps me to try and think about how can I apply that to my life today, and hopefully that helps you to think about, okay, every day, what can I choose for others? How can I look like Jesus for others? How can I mirror that attitude of Jesus, that phrase, "for you"? How can I encourage others? How can I give others opportunities? How can I meet practical need? How can I give people a hope for a better world and a better future? How can I empower others? How can I help others to know who Jesus is through my actions, through conversation? It's just that constant awareness of how we can do that. I think we know that Jesus has secured our forgiveness, and the bread and the wine reminds us of that hope in Jesus, and that we can transform our world, we can transform our communities, we can transform our families, and we can look like Jesus. It's a future that represents justice and peace and love and hope and equality and goodness and all of these amazing characteristics of God that we see in Jesus, that we can now demonstrate to others in the world that we live in, to make it a better place and to elevate people and to give them opportunities. I think, knowing Jesus, like Zacchaeus last week when we were looking at it, changes us, and as a consequence we can change the world around us. We can look like Jesus, we can change others and change things for the better. We can change communities for the better as a consequence of Jesus changing us and knowing us. I talk about it all the time, but it is life-changing. Literally, Jesus is life-changing, and knowing that, and knowing how he treated people and all of this, that's why I talk about it so much, because it is so impactful, and that is what changes the world, Jesus in and through us. I think Jesus could have chosen any way for us to remember him, and yet eating together seems so significant. That is why I've chosen this series to look at who he ate with, how he treated people, who he included, why did he eat with people. It was such a huge thing to eat with people, it was so significant. So it should still be significant for us in our community of faith. That's why we choose for it to be part of our practice, to gather together over food, to eat with people, to spend time with people, to connect with people, to share our lives in that way over meals and coffees and all of those things. Why we invest so much time and energy and money and resource and everything into doing that with people, because we think it's really important. And so what I'm going to say to finish this message off, I am going to ask you practically, who can you eat with this week? Who can you consciously choose to spend time with and gather with and pray with this week? Who can you choose to spend that time with this awareness of wanting to do things for others, to mirror Jesus, to empower others. Who could you do that with this week and ongoing? Who could you commit to do that with? And how can you transform your life, your community, to reflect the hope that we have in Jesus, really practically, not just to talk about it, not just to say, yep, there's hope in Jesus, there's another way. How can you live that out? How can you practically do that this week and show others and evidence that this week in your communities, in your workplace, in your family, through conversations, through acts, meeting needs, all of those things, praying for others. How can you do that this week? Let me know how you get on. Let me know who you choose to do that with. And I'd love to hear all about it. And we'll be back next week for week 3 of Meals with Jesus.